My name is My Liddy. I was 24 years old, and I was doing what a lot of 24-year-olds in Connecticut were doing in November. Working nights at a sports bar I hated, saving money I was spending too fast, and trying not to think too hard about the fact that I didn't really know who I was. That last part sounds dramatic, but when you're adopted, it's just kind of background noise. I was adopted as an infant. My parents were good people, stable, kind. They fed me, clothed me, showed up to recitals. By every measurable standard, I had a fine childhood. But fine doesn't fill the specific hole that adoption leaves. People who weren't adopted don't always understand this. They think it's about being grateful or ungrateful. They think if your parents were good, you have nothing to mourn. But it's not about that. It's about mirrors. It's about looking at your own face every single day and having no reference point. No mother's eyes to compare yours to. No father's jawline to recognize in yourself. No grandmother's hands, just you, floating, unattached to any story that came before you. Growing up, I knew exactly two things about my biological origins. One, I was born in the Dominican Republic. Two, that was it. That was all I had. So when I turned 19, I did what felt like the only thing I could control. I got the Dominican Republic flag tattooed on my upper arm. My adoptive mom sat me down afterward with this exhausted look on her face. My Liddy, you are going to regret that. I looked her dead in the eye and said, no, I won't. And I never did, because that tattoo wasn't some rebellious phase. It wasn't a party decision or a dare. It was grief. It was identity. It was the only piece of myself I actually owned. That flag meant I came from somewhere, even if I don't know where, even if I can't find it. I came from somewhere, and I refused to pretend otherwise. 5 years later, that tattoo changed my entire life. The bar was slammed that Tuesday night. We had 3 TVs broken, 1 server who called out, and a table of 12 that wanted to split their check 14 different ways. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and my third Red Bull, carrying 2 overloaded trays through a crowd of people who were too drunk to move out of the way. That's when I heard it. Wait, just that one word. I turned around slowly, fully expecting someone to tell me I'd spilled something on myself. There was a girl standing behind me, around my age. Dark hair, brown eyes, wearing a bar t-shirt that meant she worked there, though I'd never seen her before. Maybe she was new, maybe she was covering a shift, she wasn't looking at my face. She was staring at my arm, specifically at my tattoo. Her expression was strange, not rude, not aggressive, just frozen. Like she'd seen something that didn't compute. Can I help you? I asked, because honestly I had drinks to deliver. She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly reached down and rolled up her own sleeve. And I want to tell you that I reacted calmly and rationally. But that would be a lie. Because when I saw what was on her arm, my brain genuinely went offline for a full 3 seconds. The same flag, not similar, not inspired by. The same Dominican Republic flag tattoo. Same colors, same placement on the upper arm, even the same approximate size. We both just stood there. Somewhere behind us, a guy yelled, "Hey, can we get some beers over here?" Neither of us moved. Finally, she let out this short, disbelieving laugh. That is actually insane. Yeah, I managed. I mean, what are the odds? I don't know. We were both still staring at each other's arms like we needed to verify this was real. Then I said the sentence, the one that I replay in my head constantly, even now. I said it casually, just filling the awkward silence. Well, I'm adopted from the Dominican Republic, so I guess that's why I'm extra attached to it. The second those words left my mouth, her face changed. I mean changed, like someone had walked up behind her and quietly knocked all the air out of her lungs. Her smile disappeared. Her eyes went wide. She looked at me differently, like she was seeing me for the first time. What did you just say? I frowned. I said I'm adopted. From the doctor, that's why I got the tattoo. It's kind of an identity thing for me. I'm adopted from there too. Dead silence between us. Not the normal bar silence where you can't hear each other. Real silence, like the room had agreed to shut up for a second. Sorry, I said. I'm adopted from the Dominican Republic. She was speaking slowly, like she was hearing herself say it for the first time. I got this tattoo for the same reason you did. I remember getting chills that started at the base of my spine and crawled all the way up to my neck. Not normal, oh that's a fun coincidence chills, the other kind. The kind your body produces when something happens that your brain doesn't have a category for yet. Her name was Julia Tinty. After the shift ended, we ended up sitting on the curb outside the bar for almost 3 hours. At first we were laughing about it, joking, playing up the coincidence. So you're also Dominican adopted with this exact tattoo, she said. Totally normal, nothing weird about that. Completely standard bar conversation, I said. We laughed, but underneath the jokes, something was already pulling at me, because the more we talked, the stranger it got. She'd grown up in Connecticut, different town from mine, but close, like 15 minutes away close. When we figured that part out, we both got quiet for a second. 15 minutes apart, for our entire childhoods. The same grocery stores, the same highways, the same state fairs and malls and random Saturday afternoons. We probably passed each other, Julia said quietly. Like statistically, we almost definitely did. And that image wrecked me for some reason. Two little girls in shopping carts or walking through parking lots, passing within feet of each other, completely unaware. Then we compared ages. Same year, then birth months, a few weeks apart. Okay, we need to stop, Julia said, but she was smiling in this unsettled way. Stop what? Finding things. She gestured between us. Every time we find another thing, I feel like I can't breathe correctly. I knew exactly what she meant, because here's the thing nobody tells you about that kind of moment. It's not exciting exactly. It's not just fun. It's more like vertigo. Like the ground under you is still there, but you're suddenly not sure you trust it. Over the next few days, we asked every coworker we could find whether we looked alike, not in a searching, desperate way. Casually slipping it into conversation. Hey, random question, do you think me and Julia look similar? Every single person said yes, not hesitantly, not doing that polite thing where they squint and tilt their head and say, "Maybe a little?" Immediately. Confidently, one bartender physically pointed at both of us and said, flat out, "You guys have the same face, like genuinely the same face. Are you related?" We laughed it off. But we both heard the question underneath the question. The sister joke started after that. Hey sis, can you grab me a straw? Sis, table 7 needs napkins. Thanks, sis. And one night, while we were doing side work together after close, Julia looked up from rolling silverware and said, almost like she was embarrassed to say it, "We should do a DNA test." I laughed, she half laughed, but neither of us actually said no. Before the DNA test, we tried the logical thing first. We compared our adoption paperwork. Julia drove to my place one Saturday morning with a folder. I had mine out on the kitchen table. We sat across from each other and started going through them line by line. Different birth cities. Different names listed for our biological mothers. Different adoption agencies. The documents had absolutely nothing in common. I remember sitting back in my chair and exhaling. So we're just weird twins from different hospitals, Julia said. Seems like it. We laughed. But it was the kind of laugh that comes with a quiet thud of disappointment underneath it, even when you didn't realize you were hoping for something. We let it go. Life moved on the way it always does. I took a better-paying job and relocated to Virginia. Julia stayed in Connecticut. We texted constantly at first, then sometimes, then on birthdays and holidays. But I thought about her more than I should have. And I couldn't explain why. 2 years later, a Christmas gift cracked everything open. My cousin handed me a 23andMe kit at Christmas dinner with this big grin on her face. "You're always saying you want to find your biological family," she said. "So, find them." I almost didn't do it. I sat with that little box for 6 weeks before I finally spit in the tube and mailed it. Because here's what nobody tells you about DNA tests when you're adopted. It's not just curiosity. It's Russian roulette with your own history. What if the results came back and there was no one? What if there was a family who didn't want contact? What if the truth was uglier than the mystery? I had survived 20-some years on a story where the blanks were blank. The idea of filling them in terrified me. But curiosity always wins. It always does. I forgot about it. Then the email arrived. It was a Tuesday night. I was alone in my apartment eating cereal for dinner, which tells you everything about where I was in life at that moment. I opened the app expecting percentages and pie charts, and I found a distant cousin match, a stranger's name in a database. I messaged her not expecting anything. She replied within hours. Her name was Molly. She was warm immediately. She'd been searching too. Over the next few days, she told me things that unraveled me piece by piece. First, my biological mother had died. I stared at that sentence on my phone screen for a very long time. Dead. Gone. Past tense permanently. No chance of a phone call. No chance of a letter. No chance of ever standing in a room with her, and finally understanding where my eyes came from. I mourned a woman I'd never met, which sounds impossible until you do it. I cried until I was genuinely exhausted, then I cried more. But Molly wasn't done. She had another name for me, my biological father. Adriano Luna Collado. She had a phone number. I stared at it for an hour, then I called. He answered on the third ring. His voice was soft, older than I expected, and immediately unmistakably nervous. We stumbled through the first few minutes in broken language. His English was limited. My Spanish was embarrassingly rusty, until we found a rhythm. He told me about their life in the Dominican Republic. The poverty was the kind I'd only seen in documentaries. Dirt floors, not enough food. Children getting sick with no money for medicine. He talked slowly, like every sentence cost him something. Then he said it. "We give you away because we love you." I pressed my hand over my mouth so he wouldn't hear me crying. He explained that one of the children had become critically ill. That there simply wasn't enough, not enough money, not enough food, not enough of anything. That giving me up for adoption was the only way he could think to give me something better. "You understand?" he kept asking. "Yes," I kept saying. "I understand." I didn't understand for a long time, but I wanted to. For the first time in 24 years, I stopped feeling like I'd been discarded. I started to feel like I'd been released, out of desperation, out of love, out of an impossible corner. Those are not the same thing. I flew to the Dominican Republic 4 months later. I was shaking from the moment I boarded the plane. I didn't know what I was walking into. I'd spoken to my father maybe 6 times on the phone. I didn't know these people. They didn't know me. What if it was awkward? What if it was painful? What if I showed up and realized that meeting them didn't give me what I thought it would? The plane landed. I grabbed my bag with hands that wouldn't stay still. I walked through the airport doors and stopped. There were at least 15 people standing there, holding balloons, holding signs, and wearing t-shirts, custom-printed t-shirts with my face on them. I burst into tears before I even fully processed what I was seeing. Then I found him in the crowd, my father. He was smaller than I imagined, older. His hair was silver. But when he looked at me, when his eyes found mine across that crowded airport, he smiled. And I recognized myself in that smile so completely that something I'd been carrying my entire life just dropped. He walked toward me crying. I walked toward him crying. We met in the middle of a Dominican airport, surrounded by strangers, and he wrapped his arms around me and held me like he was trying to make up for 24 years of distance in a single hug. "Mi hija," he said, "my daughter," over and over. "My daughter, my daughter, my daughter." I don't remember much after that, just warmth, just noise, just this overwhelming feeling of being held by people who were mine. I came home from that trip feeling like a different person, wrecked in the best possible way, fuller, heavier with meaning. I thought the mystery was solved. I thought the story was over. I was so wrong. 3 weeks after I got back, I got a Facebook message from a woman named Molly. A different Molly. She said, "I think we might be biological sisters. The name on my birth certificate matches your biological mother's." I've been searching for years. I read that message approximately 9 times, then I called her. We talked for 4 hours that first night. We compared every detail we had, dates, cities, names, descriptions. Everything lined up in the way that makes your hands shake. We took a DNA test, and then the waiting started. Anyone who has waited for DNA results knows that time moves differently. Every notification becomes a potential detonator. You check your phone 40 times a day. You rehearse both outcomes, the yes and the no, and you still aren't ready for either one. 2.5 weeks later, the results came back. Negative, not sisters, barely related. We were both devastated in this quiet, specific way. Not dramatic, just deflated. We'd built something careful and hopeful, and then had to carefully dismantle it. But during one of our last conversations, Molly sent me something. A photograph. She said she'd found it in records, a picture of my biological mother. I opened it, and the air left my body. I stared at my phone screen for a long time. Then I said out loud, to no one in my empty apartment, "Julia," because the woman in that photograph looked exactly like Julia Tinty, not a little. Not in the way people sometimes say things look alike when they're reaching for connection. Exactly. The same eyes, the same smile, the same shape of face. Like someone had aged Julia 30 years and taken her photograph. My hands were shaking as I opened my contacts. I called my father. He answered on the second ring, surprised to hear from me on a random Wednesday evening. I tried to keep my voice level. "Papa," I said, "I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me." "She, Mija, what is it?" I took a breath. "Did you ever have another child? One who was also given up for adoption?" The silence that followed lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then quietly, "Yes," I stopped breathing. "A daughter," he said. "How long ago?" He told me. The timing matched, the circumstances matched. Given up through a separate agency, through a separate arrangement. He hadn't known where she'd gone. There had been no contact, no way to find her. Until now, I hung up the phone. My fingers were already dialing before I'd fully processed what I was about to say. Julia picked up on the third ring, sounding half asleep. My Liddy. It's like 11 o'clock. Are you okay? I need to tell you something, I said. What? You're scaring me. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I pressed my hand against my forehead. Julia, I think we might actually be biological sisters. The silence this time was different from my father's. His had been weighted with old guilt. Hers was electric. Stunned. Then, barely above a whisper, what? I drove to Connecticut the next morning. There was a blizzard. I drove anyway. 8 hours through whiteout conditions, and I barely noticed because my brain was running so fast it drowned out everything else. Every scenario, every possibility, every version of what this could mean. What if it was true? What if it wasn't? What if we went through all of this and the test came back negative, and we had to look at each other across the rubble of hope and figure out what was left? When Julia opened her apartment door, she looked exactly how I felt. Terrified, hopeful, like she'd barely slept. Neither of us said anything for a second. I held up the DNA test kit. She looked at it, then at me. Then she stepped back from the door. Come in, she said quietly. The next 3 weeks were psychological warfare. We tried to act normal. We went to work, we texted, we did all the regular things. But there was this invisible wire pulled taut between us at all times. Every time I looked at her face, I was cataloging it differently now. The shape of her nose, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the sound of her laugh. Was that familiar because I'd known her for years, or was it familiar because we shared blood? One night she called me at 1 a.m. I can't sleep, she said. Me neither. What if it's yes? Then it's yes. And what if it's no? I didn't answer right away. Then we already know we found each other anyway, I finally said, and that's already insane enough. She was quiet for a second. I keep thinking about what you said, she told me. When we first figured out we'd grown up 15 minutes apart. What about it? That we probably passed each other, she said. That we almost definitely crossed paths. And we had no idea. Yeah, my Liddy, she said very quietly. What if we'd never gotten those tattoos? I didn't have an answer for that. The results came on a Thursday morning. Julia opened the email. I watched her eyes move across the screen. I saw the exact moment she found the answer. Because her eyes filled with tears so fast it looked like something physical had happened to her. Like she'd been hit. She looked up at me. She couldn't speak, she didn't need to. Julia, we're sisters, she said. Her voice broke completely on the last word, and then neither of us could say anything else for a long time. We were both sobbing, the ugly, uncontrolled kind that you can't perform or manage. The kind that comes from somewhere so deep it bypasses any decision to cry. We held each other in her kitchen while the morning light came through the window. Laughing, crying, not able to tell the difference. All those strange feelings suddenly crystallized into something clear and undeniable. That eerie familiarity when I was around her. The instant connection, the identical mannerisms. The way I thought about her even after years of distance. Some part of us had always known. When we called our father together, he went completely silent on the other end of the line. Then we heard him start to cry. Not gentle crying, the kind that comes from somewhere ancient and buried, the kind that carries decades of weight. Ambas, he kept saying, both of you. We flew to the Dominican Republic together 6 months later. The airport was waiting. The shirts had both our faces this time. The second our father saw Julia, he did something that I will never forget as long as I live. He reached out and took her face in both hands. Like he was holding something he thought he'd never see. Like he was making absolutely sure she was real before he let himself believe it. Mihija, he said, my daughter. Julia started crying immediately. I started crying immediately. Everyone around us started crying. 3 strangers nearby were openly wiping their eyes, and they didn't even know what was happening. For a week, we existed inside something we had no word for. Belonging. Full belonging, not the borrowed kind, not the partial kind. For the first time in our lives, we saw ourselves in other faces. Not just photographs, not just DNA percentages on a screen. Real people, real expressions. Real voices that carried sounds we recognized from our own mouths. On our last night there, Julia and I stayed awake until sunrise talking on the porch. At some point, she got quiet. Then she said, "Do you realize how easily we never could have met?" I looked at her. "One different job," she said. "One missed shift, one night you called out sick. One moment where neither of us decided to say anything about the tattoo. I know, we could have spent our entire lives not knowing," she said. "Living separate lives, 15 minutes apart, never knowing. And that thought is the one that stays with me, not the DNA test, not the airport, not the moment we called our father crying. The thought that this almost didn't happen, that the invisible thread connecting us was simultaneously so strong and so thin. A tattoo, a sentence, a Tuesday night at a Connecticut sports bar. That's what stood between two sisters finding each other and two sisters never knowing the other existed. People hear our story and immediately say it was fate. I'm still not sure I believe in fate, but I believe in this. Some connections are too strong to stay lost forever, even when they're buried under bad paperwork and different agencies and decades of distance. Even when they're separated by oceans and languages and years. Even when the odds are so absurd that no one would believe them if you wrote them in a movie. Sometimes, two people find each other anyway. Out of billions of people on this planet, I somehow found my sister. Not once, twice. Once by blood, and once by chance. And I will never, for the rest of my life, take a shift for granted again.